You just ran a very expensive Google and Facebook click ad campaign and you got a lot of clicks, but you were unable to get anyone to take your call to action. All of which means after spending a sizable portion of your marketing budget, you've got zero qualified leads. So what do you do now? In this episode, we're going to discuss the steps you'll take to build your manual lead engine consisting of your marketing channel and the message that will activate your target customer market segment, which will deliver you on demand the number of qualified leads you need within the time frame you need them without wasting months or your savings to do it. And we'll cover a whole lot more. I'm Stephen White, and this is Building Lean. Hey there, awesome founders. Welcome back once again to Building Lean, our series of workshops that cover the steps and activities your startup must take to build key business functions to sustainably generate revenues. Not only are our workshops inspired by thought leaders on startup and scale methodologies, but we also share our experience as founders as well as working with hundreds of startups and our research distilling the reasons why over 160 funded startups failed. And that's not all. Of course, we have Shafiq patiently waiting to join us immediately after this workshop's over to answer your burning startup questions related to how you can build your startup lean. If you're interested in growing your startup by building lean, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and click that notification bell nearby so you can receive the latest insights that will help you avoid mistakes that cost you time and money. This episode continues our dive into the activities and milestones you need to complete in order to successfully achieve the first startup phase of market validation. Now, as a quick refresher, market validation is where you prove that your startup idea is market viable, meaning that your business has the ability to attract customers, generate revenue, and deliver a quality product or service. During our last episode, I covered the process and metrics to finding a compelling problem that your customers will pay you to solve, which leads us to the second milestone, where we'll discuss how you can discover and activate lots of people who suffer from the same compelling problem that you found during milestone number 1. The place you'll find all those people is called a channel. Channels provide a place for your marketing message to reach your target customers, and this can occur either in person or online. Once you identify an optimal channel, you'll use it to consistently find and activate new customer leads that suffer from the same compelling problem that you're trying to solve. By discovering a channel, you'll reduce the time it takes to design and validate your sales funnel, refine your product or service through quick iterations, decrease your product abandonment rate, and increase customer satisfaction. Since Shafiq and I have coached hundreds of founders, we typically get several questions related to a startup's channel strategy. Beyond asking what a marketing channel is and how to build it, which we'll cover during this episode, we often hear founders question the need for a marketing channel. And I'd say that every single question can be summarized with something like this. Guys, why in the world do I need to worry about finding a marketing channel at first? And of course, that question is typically followed up with a comment along the lines of, you just don't understand. My startup idea is incredible. Everyone is telling me how they can't wait to get their hands on it. This is going to be a viral hit. So here's the thing. Even the hottest startups had to initially develop a channel to gain customer traction. You can look no further than the poster child of virality with Facebook. Even Facebook spent months working out how to get its users to purposefully spread the word about Facebook and join its platform. Only then did the product become viral. In other words, virality is never just an accident or a circumstance of serendipity. You must plan your startup's customer acquisition growth, and that can only happen by developing an effective channel. While I'm sure it seems for most founders that their startup idea will be a natural viral hit, more often a solution won't be viral, and you have to plan for a sustainable effort to create awareness of the problem you're solving and how your solution is better than existing alternatives. So, how do you go about doing this? Well, first off, this isn't a chicken and egg issue. Instead, it's the issue of if a tree falls in the forest and no one was there to hear it, did it make a sound? Think of it this way. If none of your early customers are there to experience your solution and the channel in which they can share their experience hasn't been planned, it's likely your viral hit will be a flop. So for founders who are still unsure about this, we can look no further than this well-funded retail startup. Launched in 2009 by former Saks executive Jonas Stern, Beyond the Rack pitched its steep markdowns on designer goods, accessories, and home decor. The sales typically lasted 48 hours or so and were announced exclusively to email subscribers. The company had 14 million members and 450,000 active buyers, according to court filings. Yep, you may get a sense already where this is heading, since this data comes from bankruptcy court filings. Here's the deal. Beyond the Rack struggled to turn a profit as it spent its funds on, quote, aggressive and costly marketing campaigns aimed at increasing customer growth, again, from those bankruptcy court papers. Now, why would a company with 14 million members and nearly 500,000 active buyers have to continue wasting money on expensive marketing campaigns? It's pretty simple. Since Beyond the Rack didn't sufficiently validate its channel hypothesis, it was never able to lower its customer acquisition costs to maintain its growth or achieve profitability. In other words, because it had a well-known founder that had a strong network to raise early investment rounds, Beyond the Rack was able to hide its lack of a proven channel by throwing more and more cash at customer acquisition. And yet, it filed for bankruptcy protection with less than $1 million in cash, which should tell you that business fundamentals always catch up with you, no matter how well funded you think you are. Now, for other founders, their marketing channel consists of an influencer strategy, quite literally, and as if these words come from the exact same script each time. We hear, but Stephen and Shafiq, my marketing channel will be through influencers who will get the word out to their followers. Guys, I already got this lined up. I don't need to worry about marketing. Once again, while it's possible that you're related to JJ Watt or Beyonce and they've already committed to promoting your idea, even that has its limits. At best, influencers can be an additive approach, but it rarely is a startup's initial core marketing channel. As an example of this, we can look at no other than Fire, which burned through millions of dollars for months on influencers to heavily promote its first event in the Caribbean. This first event was the Fire Festival, its initial service offering, which was supposed to evolve into a range of lifestyle-oriented products, services, and apps as it solved the problem related to friction when securing access to world-class talent. Even in its investor pitch deck, Fire promoted that it would be able to sell 40,000 tickets to the Fire Festival at prices ranging from $500 to $12,000. So with secured commitments of a who's who list of top celebrity influencers, you can see why many thought a pure influencer channel strategy for a brand new startup could work. Yet there are two questions that come up when using an influencer strategy. Number one, how do you keep the influencer's messaging fresh and engaging? For that matter, what's in it for them to burn up their channel to promote your solution? You need to remember that the influencer's influence is their primary asset that generates revenue for them, which means that they should be protective of it, otherwise it'll go away. And number two, what happens when you don't deliver on the messages that the influencer pushes? To answer each of those questions, let's turn back to the Fire Festival. Even with all the influencer push, you need to understand that only 5,000 tickets were sold, which is well under the projection of 40,000, and it's sort of unclear how many of those 5,000 tickets were actually paid versus given away. Now, what does this mean for you? There's a risk that an influencer's reach is way too broad when compared to your target customer market segment. So for Fire, this meant that they were paying to access millions of influencer followers when very few of those could afford the cheapest event ticket, which was $500, and didn't include travel to the destination and lodging. Even achieving 12.5% of their sales target meant that Fire's influencer channel strategy failed to reach enough qualified people who were willing to convert to a paying customer. Now, back to how you should interpret this lesson learned. The other aspect to take note of from the Fire Festival's failure is that an influencer can be really good at pushing a button. You give them the message to send out and they follow the precise instructions of when and where to do it. And in turn though, it means that influencers are poor at communicating your value proposition, taking in feedback, and then adjusting the message. By using the influencer approach, you've created a sizable barrier in your ability to learn and iterate through your marketing strategy. For the fire influencers, there was quite a bit of noise from concerned event attendees, but the influencers either ignored the message or removed the negative responses altogether. What a founder should take away is that an influencer's message is difficult to sustain. It's only effective up to a certain point, and your solution has to deliver on the promises being made, which is why a startup should not attempt to use influencers during market validation, as it's not appropriate. It's not appropriate when you're not ready to handle all that comes with the possible demand generated by them. In the Fire Festival's case, not only was its influencer marketing channel a failure, its solution was a massive flop too, and something that we'll cover in episode 11 as we discuss milestone number 4 of market validation related to solution design. Now keep in mind, it's not that using influencer strategy is something to avoid altogether. Instead, your startup needs to be prepared for when you should leverage influencers, which is during the 3rd startup phase of sustainable growth. So, what are other alternative methods for a startup to develop its channel? Well, many founders turn to the magic of ad networks owned by Facebook and Google in the hope that they will provide their startup the reach needed to access millions and millions of early customers. Well, makes sense, because while it's true that both of these companies' ad networks dominate the advertising world, when you prematurely rely on either of these as a marketing channel, you're ignoring the fact that you're competing with others for message placement and consumer reach. If you're unable to define your customer segment clearly or have an unproven message, you can quickly spend hundreds and thousands of dollars on poor performing ads that result in little to no leads converting. Sure, you'll see plenty of encouraging clicks, but when you attempt to qualify those leads by getting them to give up their contact information, you'll discover that these represent many errant or fat finger clicks. Or at worst, you're dealing with a bunch of bots that aren't real customers. Now, another channel option for some startups is a pure retailer strategy. This approach means that the founder is focused on getting placement within another company's store. While it seems fairly logical for consumer packaged goods or food products, the risky assumption is that by being in the store, the product will sell itself. However, most founders overlook the thousands of products they walk past in most stores when acting as consumers themselves. Also, they miss the effort other major brands expend to feature their products, usually at the expense of other competing products in the same category. Retailers are more appropriate for startups in the 3rd startup phase of sustainable growth. For early stage businesses though, manual direct sales are necessary to prove out how you'll reach and engage your initial customers, which you can't do when following a retailer channel strategy. One last channel approach that startups take is by using channel partners or resellers. While this is similar to the retail channel strategy, the assumption here is that the startup will create an incentive for the independent sales agent to actively feature the startup's product or service in its catalog and then drive up sales. The flaw in this assumption is that the channel partner will remain loyal to the startup rather than recognize that the channel partner solution is focused on providing a wide range of products and services, and its goal is to highlight the best performing solutions in each category, as in those that take the least amount of time and effort to sell at the highest possible margin. It makes sense, that's their interest. Clearly, this is not in direct alignment with the startup's needs, as the founder should focus on understanding the optimal message to trigger a qualified lead and the placement to promote its solution in support of a channel partner, if the startup chooses this method during the 3rd startup phase. So in summary, the best method during market validation to reach your customers is through the direct channel you'll manually develop. Remember, you can leverage the other 4 channel strategies when your startup matures, is ready for the responsibility and maintaining those channel methods. When it comes to discovering the channel where you'll engage and activate qualified leads for your startup idea, you need to have a plan in place to measure whether you're on track with hitting your goals. In case you missed our previous episode, we use a technique called OKR, which stands for Objective and Key Results. OKR is a fantastic framework for setting and measuring goals and the results of the activities to achieve them. There's actually a famous history regarding the use of OKRs within high growth organizations, which is why this process is perfect for your startup. For this second milestone of discovering your channel, we've designed a 14-day OKR that keeps you focused on completing the activities necessary to finish this milestone within 2 weeks. The key results correspond directly with your progress on the underlying work plan. So let's review exactly what your execution cycle should be. Since we've already done all the hard work by building out a project guide, I'll use this as a reference point for this episode. Now, the key aspect is as you begin each activity, the key aspect for each activity is you need to plan your work so that it's completed in manageable and bite-sized chunks. What this does is this prevents the feeling of being overwhelmed in the work ahead or discouraged when you encounter a small setback. Now, once you've made your activity plan, then using the framework, tools, and process guides that I'm about to cover, you'll work on each activity in an orderly manner, which will keep you focused and on target. After completing all the activities for a given milestone, you need to schedule time to review your results with an advisor. Your advisor can help you with a fresh pair of eyes to quickly determine if you have discovered your channel or not. In this last step of your execution cycle, you need to determine whether your idea suffers from a fatal flaw related to your channel assumption. If you have advisors who are well versed in lean methodologies, then they should be able to help you perform this analysis. Now, if not, you can contact myself or Shafiq for help with this. Okay, now that you understand how to proceed using a project guide, let's look quickly at the detailed activities for market validation's second milestone, channel discovered. The process of discovering your initial channel includes validating that your initial marketing message will engage your customer prospects. This is the basis for your initial lead engine. To successfully achieve the channel discovered milestone, you'll complete the following 6 activities. So once again, let's look at each activity in detail. Returning to the results of your customer interviews from the first milestone, you'll develop the initial marketing messages you'll use to engage and activate your prospective customers. These marketing messages will be in the form of ads that describe the problem you're solving, the negative emotion related to the problem, your solution to the problem, how your solution is clearly better than existing alternatives, and a clear call to action. Seems like a lot, right? Well, here's how you do it. Your ads will take the form of a text copy in simple, rich media, as in a picture or basic video. Since you haven't proven that this ad will work, there's no point in wasting money on high quality production or media. You can use your phone to capture the pictures or video you need, or you can find stock photos that you can find online. You'll use our ad design template to quickly build your awareness campaign, ad, or flyer, and you'll be able to aggregate all the elements that need to go in that ad campaign right into that design template. So with regards to the solution description that you'll use in your ad, your solution hypothesis will be sufficient in describing how your potential product or service will solve your customer's compelling problem during these initial marketing messages. And when it comes to your initial call to action, or CTA, you'll ask that the prospective customer provide their name and contact information so that they can get more information on your product or service. Remember, you're testing your messaging right now, not actually trying to sell your product or service. You'll need to prove that the ad is effective and clear, but before you run your first ad campaign, you'll test it manually to confirm that it resonates with your target customers. This means you'll return to the same place where you conducted your customer interviews, this time with your ad in a survey tool. For each customer identified, you'll provide them with your ad copy and observe whether they take the call to action to provide their contact information. After they finish reading your ad, you'll ask your prospective customer to complete a survey questionnaire to understand their impression of the ad and why they chose to either take or not take the CTA. After 20 manual face-to-face surveys, or in COVID world, you have to do this online, you'll have enough data to revise your initial ads based on real customer feedback. Similar to iteratively interviewing customers to refine your problem hypothesis, you'll reperform your manual ad testing in 10-person tranches until you have about 50% of your prospects affirmatively taking the CTA at the end of your ad copy. So why do we iterate? Well, it's because your ad can suffer from one of 2 issues. Number 1, your ad may have technical errors like bad grammar, poor spelling, or just a poor choice of words. Or number 2, the ad may also have content errors, such as you're solving for a problem that your prospective customers just don't identify with. In this case, you have gotten the perception of the problem wrong based on your description of the problem itself. Or it could also be that your hypothesized solution is not what your potential customer wants. The manual testing is designed to help you determine if you have technical errors or content errors. You cannot determine content errors. This is important for you to keep in mind. You cannot determine content errors unless you have eliminated the technical errors first. With your initial ad copy validated, you'll need to set up how you'll capture performance metrics so you can measure whether your ads and channel are effective in generating leads now that you're ready to reach customers beyond your initial manual outreach. The data that you'll capture will measure which messages and channel placements are best at engaging prospects, as well as converting leads into qualified leads by comparing your key performance indicators for each ad and placement run. Now you're ready to run your experiments to determine your optimal placement source and ad variation that will generate your target number of qualified leads within your budget. The metrics captured during your experiments will also determine your backup ads and channels in case your initial success isn't sustained. Now keep in mind, these experiments are designed to develop a well-performing manual lead engine. By following this iterative process that validates the best performing ad message, then the best placement with that ad, you'll be confident in your ability to regularly generate leads when you need them. In other words, just because you generate 100 qualified leads once, it doesn't mean that you're done with this process. You'll discover that those leads age quickly, as in those qualified leads that you just activated will lose interest within days or weeks if you're unable to solve their problem. Until you prove out your pricing in milestone number 3 and your solution value in milestone number 4 of market validation, you'll need to run this parallel lead engine process to consistently pump in new qualified leads as you run experiments to validate your key business assumptions for each of those upcoming milestones. At the end of the second milestone, Channel Discover, you'll once again analyze your results and determine next steps based on the 3 assessment criteria questions. Is your cost per qualified lead below your target budget? Can you generate your desired number of qualified leads within your target time frame? Is it feasible for you to generate enough leads based on your budget to achieve your sales target of 5 pre-orders for the market validation phase? And that's 5 pre-orders for a B2C startup, and it'd be 2 pre-orders for B2B startups. Now, if you've answered yes to each of these 3 questions, then you'll proceed next to the next milestone, milestone number 3 of the price determined. But to achieve this milestone number 2, it's going to take you approximately 2 weeks. Now, what do you do if you can't answer these questions affirmatively? Well, that means it's time to proceed through your fatal flaw analysis for milestone number 2. Your product idea suffers from the fatal flaw related to milestone number 2 if any of the following 2 test conditions are true. So let's get started with the first test, when you examine your cost per lead. If your calculated cost per lead is greater than 10% of your product selling price, then your idea will suffer from the second fatal flaw, where sales will take too long and cost too much for your startup to be successful. Now, I want you to note one thing. Since you're in the market validation phase, you may not have enough data to calculate your cost per lead with any precision. While that aspect makes this test a little bit imperfect, your focus needs to be on understanding how you'll develop an effective channel that will enable your startup to attract new customer leads for less than 10% of your selling price. This means that you'll use the data you did collect to estimate whether you're at least close to this metric, as well as develop a working hypothesis on how you'll drive down the cost of generating qualified leads. If you're unable to do this, your cost of reaching your customers will be too high to create a sustainable business. When you fail this test condition with expensive customer lead costs, you can take 2 corrective actions. Number 1, you could develop your own channel, examples of which are blogging, social media presence, YouTube videos, or even live events like a meetup. And number 2, the second corrective action you can take, you may find it easier to piggyback on someone else's channel by partnering with a complementary business that will enable you to gain reach to your target customer segment. Now, the second test you perform is based on the actual cost of generating a lead based on your early metrics. You'll determine whether you have enough money to achieve the initial number of targeted leads to generate sufficient sales. Keep in mind the goal for market validation for you to generate 5 pre-orders for B2C startups, for a B2C startup, and 2 for a B2B startup. This means that you'll likely need at least 100 qualified leads to just convert 5 pre-orders for a B2C startup. So many founders don't think through the metrics on this as they already start their startup idea being underfunded, while praying that an angel investor cuts them a check before spending any of their own money. This is also why you should make sure that you're spending your money wisely and in the right order. Burning through most of your savings on product development and then running out of cash as you try to generate sales to regenerate your cash flow will be one of the most frustrating mistakes you can make as a founder. So the question you need to answer is, do you have enough money to acquire 100 leads to achieve market validation? In this instance, the fatal flaw cause is due to under budgeting the cost of developing an efficient customer acquisition channel. If this test condition is true, then you can take one or more corrective actions to fix the fatal flaw. Number one, you may need to pause your startup's development so you can spend the next 3 to 6 months to build up your own personal savings to survive this early phase when there is little to no cash inflow. Number two, you can develop a no-cost channel option where the cost is literally your time as opposed to hard dollars out. This is where you hustle with manual efforts such as handing out promotional flyers or hosting workshops on topics that are helpful and relevant to your target customer. So let's look at a fairly large failure of a startup that suffered from the second fatal flaw. Remember the earlier example of Beyond the Rack and its 14 million members? So what went wrong? This seems like a solid idea with early traction and a clearly experienced founder. What's not clear is whether the founders actually understood the cost of acquiring new leads or if they had a working thesis for reducing those costs. They quickly burned through significant funding in the tens of millions of dollars just to acquire new customers. Yet, Beyond the Rack could not figure out how to reduce those costs. The lesson learned here is that no matter how much early success you may gain, if you skip the early critical step of developing a cost-effective method for reaching new customers, your startup will relentlessly burn through cash until it becomes to a fiery end. Fire festival, no pun intended. Maybe. Okay, during our next workshop, we're going to examine the third market validation milestone where you'll determine the price your customers are willing to profitably pay for your solution before producing and delivering your product or service. We'll also identify the activities you need to perform and the tools you'll use so you can efficiently complete this milestone. Now, before we jump over to Shafiq to answer your questions, if you're looking to change how you grow your startup by building lean and you find these workshops helpful, please subscribe to this YouTube channel and click the notification button, as well as give us a like or drop a positive comment. Also, if you know of other founders or product managers who could benefit from our workshops, please share this video with them so they too can build their startups lean and avoid mistakes that cost them time and money. Building Lean is brought to you by the Lean Mastery Incubator. Unlike other incubators or accelerators that rush you to pitch to investors whether you're ready or not, Lean Mastery guides you in building key business functions that turn up revenues fast, which push you in the best position to successfully raise money and outrun your competition. Learn more about how you can become a Lean Mastery Incubator member at leanmastery.co. Thank you all for watching, and now over to Shafiq to get us started with answering your burning startup questions.
Hi everyone, Shafiq here. Welcome to another edition of Founders Forum, where we answer questions submitted by founders and innovators like yourself. But before we do, I want to remind you to subscribe to our channel somewhere right here, as well as click on the notification bell so you can gain immediate access to the latest episodes of our acclaimed show where we help founders by answering critical questions related to systematically building your startup. Whew, that was a mouthful. All right, hey Steven, are you ready with our first question?
Hey there, Shafiq. I'm ready to roll with our first question right here, and it comes from Mark of mygoodroof.com. But before I get to Mark's question, I do want to let everyone know one thing. Look, guys, we love receiving questions from founders and innovators like y'all, and we noticed a couple of you have asked us whether we would mention your name and or your startup when we discuss your question, which is really cool. So in response to this, we made a slight change to the form in which you submit a question. We've included the ability for you to opt in to allow us to do just that. We want to make sure we have your permission rather than just assume that's okay. So now you don't need to feel like you have to select that option. We'd love it if you do, but we also recognize that some questions are best left to being anonymous. So let's return back to Mark's question. He wrote, if I am in the beginning phases of starting a company, but it's just me, what is the best way to get connected to individuals who could join the project? He notes that most good innovations occur in teams, so what is the best platform or vertical to find those who could be interested?
Okay, well, when looking to collaborate with potential team members, you have to be able to give them a reason to want to help you. And if you're just starting out, then that reason can't just be because you pay them. Those are not really the kinds of initial recruits you want. So if paying is the only reason they join you, then your interests and theirs are not aligned. And what do I mean by that? Well, most successful founders have they have one trait in common, and that is when it comes to attracting talent, they're really good at communicating how the problem they're trying to solve and how by solving it, they're going to change the world. In other words, they kind of have that whole communication thing down, right? So I'll use Steven's man crush, Elon Musk, as an example. Yeah, Steven, don't get excited. So most people believe that Elon Musk and Martin Eberhard were the ones who came up with the concept of building a fast electric car that would be better than an internal combustion engine. Well, would it surprise you to learn that neither did? What both Elon and Eberhard have in common about the origins of Tesla is that both were looking to build an electric car for the same reason. And that reason was they wanted to stop the pollution caused by internal combustion engine transportation. But they didn't know if it was possible. And they both had stumbled onto AC Propulsion, a company out of San Dimas, California. Tom Gage of AC Propulsion Systems, along with his partner Alan, if I get the name right, Kokachny, had already built the T0, which went from 0 to 60 in 3.6 seconds and had a range of 300 miles. So both Elon and Martin knew what they wanted to do was technically feasible, and they both got to know about AC propulsion because they were both trying to solve the same problem, and their network introduced them to AC propulsion. So how did Elon and Martin meet? Well, they can both thank and forgive Tom Gage for connecting Elon to Martin. I only say thank and forgive because some years later, Elon and Martin had a huge and very public falling out. So, Mark, the answer that you can find great teammates by one, effectively learning how to communicate the problem you're trying to solve, and then finding the knowledge community that can help you solve the problem. So in Elon's case, he and Martin were plugged into the local universities, which allowed them to understand the leading edge of transportation transformation. There were projects out of Stanford that were focused on trying to build an electric car. So showing up at these knowledge community events will help you make the right connections. You'll have to check your local market for that. And I know, how can you network in the age of COVID? Well, COVID is not going to be around, last forever. And in the meantime, you have work to do. You have to figure out how, if the problem you're trying to solve is really and is real and is technically feasible. Remember, both Martin and Elon knew what they wanted to do was technically feasible because of AC propulsion. And so you have to kind of network around and say, okay, I'm trying to do X, and here's the problem, and here's how I'm trying to solve it. Is this even possible? And in this case, both of them were looking to solve the pollution problem by converting the internal combustion engine into an electric motor, which of course would have zero emissions. So, they needed to know that that was technically feasible, that they could in fact make an electric motor that could be driven on batteries and give the same kind of results as an internal combustion car. So now in case you already know the problem you're solving and have spent time developing an effective way to talk about it, the problem, and you're already at that point, then it's technically feasible to solve the problem, then you can use LinkedIn to find like-minded entrepreneurs. Use LinkedIn to create communities around the problem you're solving. So that might be like creating a group or plug in into existing groups. For instance, if you were trying to learn about startups, there's plenty of startup groups. Or if you're trying to learn about clean technologies, there's plenty of stuff around clean technologies. Lots of LinkedIn groups where professionals talk about problems and do posts and query each other. So you will by creating that community, you'll solve two of your challenges at once. One, you will attract customers who suffer from the problem. And two, you will likely attract talent that wants to help you solve that problem. And that's assuming the community already doesn't exist. If it does, just join it, right? So a regular post describing the problem and the technical challenges you have to overcome will help you attract the right audience. And if you scan your news feed on LinkedIn, you can see people asking interesting questions every so often with specific hashtags to engage others who may have insight about the question that they want answered. So people who answer become your target to connect and start the conversation. So Stephen, you're our social media butterfly. Can you add your thoughts about how to network on LinkedIn and on Facebook?
Yes, I can. But let me explain by sharing something that you and I do during our in-person meetups. Now, one suggestion that we had that we implemented during our events was to get people to stop talking about their startup ideas when networking with other founders. And I thought our approach was quite clever and effective in that we told founders to introduce themselves to people they didn't know and tell those people about the problem they wanted to solve, as well as who had that problem. By shifting their focus to discussing the problem instead of the solution, these founders were able to have much more robust conversations and network to find others who were interested in solving the same problem or similar problems. So not only did founders regularly message us now about how much they missed that networking time, at the time, I remember you and I talked about this. We could actually tell that this networking approach worked really well by watching how many founders would participate in networking and how well they would score it in our post-event surveys. So likewise, as you've hinted at, founders can find others online who share the same passion by joining Facebook groups focused on the issue that your startup is focused upon and discussing the problems related to that. And also, as you mentioned, founders can search hashtags on LinkedIn related to a topic or a problem their startup is trying to solve. LinkedIn's actually pretty fantastic about that. Now, we do get this question that comes up quite often with us. For those who are worry about sharing their idea with someone who's also interested in the same problem, you shouldn't fear someone stealing your idea because you're really focused on discussing the problem itself and not how you plan on solving it. If anything, you're more likely to accelerate your understanding about the problem you intend to solve by speaking with others who care passionately about the same topic, which as an added benefit can lead to new teaming opportunities, just as Shafiq mentioned. So being passionate about a topic and having somebody who's passionate as well, there's really some synergies that come through there. Okay, Shafiq, we have our next question here. And it comes from a pair of first-time founders whose consumer packaged goods startup is in the middle of market validation. And this question comes from one of the co-founders. As she writes, I'm debating with my co-founder what's the fastest way to validate whether our messaging is working. Which one do you recommend? Ads on Google, Facebook, or Amazon?
Well, I might have a surprising answer here. None of the above. If you're trying to see if your messaging is working, by performing the testing using an online test, then you're going to waste a lot of time and money. And the reason is because you're lacking control over several variables that you have to manage as you do your testing. So the first variable is the target market demographics that accurately exposes the ad to your defined target customer segment. And yes, all these platforms allow you to pinpoint the audience. But the first time out, when you're trying to figure out how to configure each tool to only select the target demographics, you'll encounter several false starts. So you're not really sure if you're getting the right audience is the basic point there, right? And then second variable is the message that you're testing itself. When you do get a click, you have no way to determine if your ad actually activated your target audience or was activating members who are not in your target segment and don't have the problem, but respond because you use provocative imagery to gain the click. So, and we see, founders when they're testing trying to do all kinds of things just to simply get people to respond. So, and what I mean by that is that did you run the equivalent of a beer commercial, with Swedish ski team wearing bikinis on a bus? That kind of marketing works for beer companies, but likely will not work for you. The third variable, the non-clicks, you have no way to determine why they did not click on the ad in the first place. So what you'll notice is that your click-through rate or CTR is very low, which in turn is going to cost you more per click because Google and Facebook know that they will have to display your ad to many more people than others competing for the same demographics that you're targeting. And therefore, they will jack up the price you'll have to pay in order to show your ad. That is why we recommend performing the message validation testing as a manual test. All the platforms are in a sense automated. Only after you have proven message, then you should try and run the ad online. Stephen, would you like to add your thoughts to this?
Yeah, I do want to add a touch on a few things. While Google and Facebook do offer advertisers a choice to pay based on the number of ad impressions, most likely an advertiser, such as the person asking this question, will choose to pay a cost per click, or CPC, as that typically lines up the action of the person who saw the ad with the actual interest in the ad as reflected by the click, which is something you're hinting at. Now, of course, this does mean that your click-through rate is a key metric in understanding whether your messaging is effective or not. And to reinforce what you said, this is also why manually testing your message first before burning up your ad budget is really important. So since we're talking about manual testing, let's give a couple of examples of this, because it can take a couple different forms. But let's give some examples. So one example, if your startup idea relates to, say, an app for dog lovers, you could set up a sign at the entrance of a popular local dog park and count with a clicker how many people walking by read the ad or ignore the ad. You can track that. Or if your startup idea relates to a product, such as something for a do-it-yourself car mechanic, you could hand out flyers outside of an auto parts store and see how many are interested in your offer based on that interaction. Now, there's one last thing I do want to highlight here. Shafiq's feedback is clearly focused on startups in the market validation phase, where hustle is really what's super important and needed for messaging validation, rather than just firing off ads at will and seeing what comes back. All right, one last question here, and this one comes from an entrepreneur who's on his second startup. In his original startup, he had some success running a Kickstarter campaign. He got it funded and exceeded his campaign goal, but he struggled to gain traction afterwards. So he's back, and for this latest startup, he's focused on a skincare product. And his question is, in the last episode, you discussed having a defined customer segment that is narrowly tailored initially. I've been able to identify two narrow customer segments during customer discovery. Does this mean that I need to develop two separate messaging and placement plans? Can you explain why or why not?
So I guess the short answer is yes. You'll have to develop two separate messages and placement plans. And the reason is because trying to target both narrow segments will make your messaging, unnecessarily long. So why is that? Because more than likely, both segments have a very different use case when the problem arises, which of course, you kind of like, in order to make the message effective, you have to kind of be able to put them in a situation when they would arise a problem, so they self-identify with it. And then they have different existing alternatives to solve the problem, and have likely very different ways of conceiving of what the solution is. In other words, the solution vision is different. So as an example, let's say you have let's say you have a really awesome tasting salt, okay, that enhances the flavor of food. And let's say that through customer discovery, you figured out that both restaurants and stay-at-home moms are the two narrow segments you can easily target because you have reach into those segments, right? So developing a common message for both groups as well as potential solution packaging is not really possible. Even though you have the same underlying solution for both segments, how your solution is sold and packaged is vastly different for each target segment, the restaurant and the stay-at-home mom. So like, for example, showing a bulk salt package to a stay-at-home mom in an ad is not going to make her want to purchase or click or learn more about that salt, nor is showing a prepackaged small plastic salt hand grinder going to move a chef. So the messaging really has to be, has to anchor them in their experience, not the other segment's experience. And having one common message is just going to dilute it for both. So your solution will be useful, and the other side of it is the solution is useful for one and not the other segment. So since they both have different existing alternatives and understanding the problem differently, I'm sure you can mash up and tell a very generic story, but likely neither segment will respond. But the key here is for an ad to be effective, it must be super concise and to the point. Also, the placement will be different for both segments. You'll not be effective reaching stay-at-home moms by going to the local fresh food markets where restaurant chefs go to purchase their fresh supplies daily. So you can't just throw up either a sign up there or like a flyer to see if you can get, or even pass out flyers to people coming in to shop at that market. And you won't find the same chefs at a local grocery store where moms show up every week. So as a matter of fact, there are no problems where the exact same solution packaged exactly the same way can serve every market segment, and they all have the same existing alternatives. So for all those reasons, your messages simply won't be effective, and neither will your placement be, trying to reach two segments with one ad and one set of placement. And that's why you have to kind of like work each one in turn. Stephen, would you like to add your thoughts to that long explanation that I gave?
Yeah, actually, I thought you were pretty on point. So, and I really agree on your feedback. What was coming to my mind is that it seems to be that founders often want to double dip by leveraging one message across multiple target customer segments. And this can really be due to a founder's worry that by focusing on only one market segment, they'll lose their ability to sell to those other segments altogether. Now, unfortunately, that viewpoint, that approach often results in confusion with both customer segments as the founder attempts to bifurcate their message, just as you gave as an example with the salt example that you spoke about. So in that case, the founder really has two options. They can develop and run a distinct campaign separately for each of the two customer segments, as you suggested, or they can choose what the data is showing as their first best customer segment and run their campaign targeting that segment first if they are budget constrained. Now, with either option, a founder will eventually test the other segment or segments later during the repeatable sales and delivery phase in preparation for executing their scale strategy. So having interest in reaching two or more customer segments will not be wasted. And that's really the most important thing that I really want founders to think about. It's liberating to know that what you see as an opportunity is not going to go to waste for later. Okay, everyone, as a reminder, in addition to our regular incubator process, we're offering a special cohort for our incubator coming up. If you have ever tried to run a Kickstarter campaign and failed, or had a successful campaign but failed to continue selling your product post Kickstarter campaign, just as the experience was for the last person who sent a question in for us, or you're thinking about running a brand new Kickstarter campaign, especially this fall or next spring, you're going to want to apply to Lean Mastery Incubator by August 15th so you can join our Kickstarter cohort. Spots are limited, and we are using a rolling admissions process, which means that the quicker you apply, the better chance you'll have to gain one of the remaining coveted incubator spots. This Kickstarter cohort will start on September 1st, 2020. So to learn more about the Lean Mastery Incubator Kickstarter cohort and apply, visit leanmastery.co/Kickstarter. Act quick, don't miss out on this. Get your applications in today. We'll help you get ready for your next Kickstarter campaign. So that wraps up this week's Founders Forum episode. Thank you all for watching, and we look forward to helping you be successful in pursuing your startup dreams by building lean.
Steven, if I could just add one last comment, and that would be that if you just have a startup that's not going to use Kickstarter, that's okay too. We have our normal application process for incubator members, and they can apply, of course, also at www.leanmastery.co, and you'll find links below this episode on posting where you can apply. So just wanted to add that, Stephen.